The termination letter sat on Amara Hassan's kitchen table like a death sentence, its corporate letterhead gleaming under the harsh, fluorescent light of her small apartment in Queens. Sheikh Rashid Al-Zahra had signed it himself, his elegant signature a stark contrast to the cold language that ended her employment after 7 years of caring for his Manhattan penthouse. The reason cited was inappropriate use of employer resources and violation of household policies. But Amara knew the real crime. She had been caught teaching her 8-year-old daughter Layla to read using books from the Sheikh's extensive library. Layla pressed against her mother's side, her dark eyes wide with the particular fear children develop when they sense their world shifting beneath them. "Mama, did I get you in trouble?" Amara's throat tightened as she folded the letter with trembling hands. Outside their window, the sounds of Jackson Heights carried on unchanged, the rumble of the 7 train, the calls of street vendors, the multilingual conversations that made this corner of New York feel like home to immigrants from around the world. But inside their small apartment, everything had changed. "No, Habibti," Amara whispered, using the Arabic endearment that connected them to the grandmother Layla had never met. "You did nothing wrong. Learning is never wrong." The irony wasn't lost on her. Sheikh Rashid Al-Zahra had built his fortune on education technology, creating platforms that brought learning to millions of children worldwide. His company's mission statement, which Amara had dusted around countless times, proclaimed that every child deserves access to quality education regardless of their circumstances. Yet when he discovered his housekeeper's daughter quietly reading in his study after school, absorbed in a picture book about marine biology, his response had been swift and merciless. 3 months later, Amara stood behind the counter of a halal grocery store in Astoria, her hands raw from stocking shelves and her back aching from the long hours. The pay was 1/3 of what she'd earned working for the Sheikh, and the apartment they'd been forced to move to was smaller, darker, in a building where the heat worked sporadically and the neighbors complained about Layla's occasional laughter. "Mrs. Hassan," called Mr. and Khalil, the store owner. "There's someone here to see you." Amara looked up to find a woman in an expensive coat standing near the produce section, looking distinctly out of place among the bags of rice and canned goods. She was tall, blonde, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of private schools and summer homes. "And do you Amara Hassan?" the woman asked, her voice carrying a slight accent Amara couldn't place. "Yes. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a pediatric psychologist, and I work with gifted children. I understand your daughter Layla was reading at an advanced level." Amara's hands stilled on the inventory clipboard. "Who told you that?" "I'd rather not say, but someone who knew about her abilities reached out to our program. We provide educational support for children who show exceptional promise, but lack access to appropriate resources." That evening, Amara sat across from Dr. Mitchell in a coffee shop near LaGuardia Airport, watching planes take off through the large windows, while Layla colored quietly in a workbook the psychologist had brought. The assessment results were spread across the small table, like pieces of a puzzle Amara had never known existed. "Layla is reading at a high school level," Dr. Mitchell explained gently. "Her comprehension and analytical skills are extraordinary for her age. She's what we call profoundly gifted." Amara felt something crack open in her chest, a mixture of pride and terror. "What does that mean?" "It means she needs educational opportunities that match her abilities. Without proper support, children like Layla often become frustrated, withdrawn, or develop behavioral problems. But with the right resources, we can't afford special schools," Amara said quickly. "I work in a grocery store. We barely make rent. That's why I'm here. Our program provides full scholarships for qualifying families. Layla would attend the Riverside Academy, one of the top schools for gifted children in the city. Transportation, meals, books, everything would be covered." Amara looked at her daughter, who was now reading the ingredients on Dr. Mitchell's coffee cup with the same intensity she'd once brought to the Sheikh's marine biology books. "Why would you do this for us, Doctor?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup, "Because every child deserves the chance to reach their potential, regardless of their family's circumstances. And because someone believes Layla's story deserves a different ending than the one she's currently living." Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Sheikh Rashid Al-Zahra stared at the quarterly reports from his education technology company. The numbers were impressive. Revenue up 30%, user engagement at an all-time high, expansion into 12 new countries ahead of schedule. But the success felt hollow, tainted by a memory he couldn't shake. He could still see Amara's face that day 3 months ago when he discovered her daughter in his study. The little girl had been sitting cross-legged on the Persian rug, completely absorbed in a book about ocean creatures, her lips moving silently as she sounded out the more complex words. When she looked up and saw him, her face had lit up with excitement. "Mr. Al-Zahra, did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts? And they're so smart they can solve puzzles and open jars." He should have been charmed. Instead, he'd felt a surge of anger that surprised him with its intensity. This was his private space, his sanctuary, and here was this child treating it like her personal library. When he'd confronted Amara later, her explanation had only made him angrier. "She waits for me to finish work, and sometimes she gets bored. The books keep her quiet. I didn't think." "You didn't think it was inappropriate for your daughter to treat my home like her personal playground. These books are valuable, Amara. Some of them are first editions. She's very careful with them. She loves to read, and we can't afford. That's not my problem." The words had come out harsher than he'd intended, but his pride wouldn't let him take them back. He'd built his fortune on discipline, on maintaining boundaries, on never letting personal feelings interfere with business decisions. Allowing his housekeeper's daughter to use his library set a precedent he wasn't comfortable with. Now, 3 months later, Rashid found himself thinking about that conversation more often than he cared to admit. His new housekeeper was efficient and professional, but the penthouse felt different somehow, colder, emptier. There were no more sounds of quiet laughter from the study, no more excited whispers about marine life or astronomy. His assistant knocked on the door, interrupting his brooding. "Sir, your mother is on line 1 from Dubai." Rashid's mother had a way of calling at precisely the moments when he least wanted to examine his conscience. "Rashid, Habibi, how are you?" "I'm fine, Mama. How are you and Baba?" "We're well, Alhamdulillah. I was just reading about your company's new literacy program in Jordan. I'm proud of what you're building." Rashid felt a familiar warmth at his mother's approval, followed immediately by an uncomfortable twist in his stomach. "Thank you, Mama. You know, it reminds me of when you were small and you used to teach the neighborhood children to read. You were so patient with them, so generous with your time and knowledge." The memory hit him like a physical blow. He had forgotten about those afternoons in Riyadh, sitting under the date palm in his family's courtyard, helping children from less fortunate families with their homework. His mother had always encouraged it, saying that knowledge shared was knowledge multiplied. "That was a long time ago, Mama. Not so long that you've forgotten the lessons, I hope. Your father always said that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away that makes others richer." After the call ended, Rashid sat in the gathering dusk of his office, the lights of Manhattan beginning to twinkle below him like earthbound stars. His father's words echoed in his mind, mixing uncomfortably with the memory of Layla's excited face as she discovered the wonders hidden in his books. He found himself walking to his study, a room he'd avoided since firing Amara. The Persian rug where Layla used to sit was perfectly clean, the books arranged in precise order on their shelves. Everything was exactly as it should be, yet something essential was missing. On impulse, he pulled out the marine biology book Layla had been reading that day. As he flipped through its pages, a small piece of paper fell out, a drawing in crayon of an octopus with 3 hearts carefully labeled in a child's handwriting. At the bottom, in careful letters, Layla had written, "Thank you for letting me learn about the ocean. I want to be a marine biologist when I grow up, so I can protect the animals." Rashid stared at the drawing for a long moment, feeling something shift inside his chest. This child had dreams, aspirations that reached far beyond her current circumstances, and he had crushed them over a library book and wounded pride. The next morning, Rashid did something he hadn't done in years. He took the subway. The 7 train to Queens was crowded with working people heading to jobs across the city, their faces reflecting the quiet determination of those who understood that survival required constant effort. He found himself studying their expressions, wondering about their stories, their dreams, their children's futures. The halal grocery store in Astoria was smaller than he'd expected, cramped with products that spoke to the diverse community it served. Behind the counter, he saw Amara, her hijab neatly pinned, her movements efficient despite the obvious fatigue in her shoulders. She looked up as he approached, and he watched her face cycle through surprise, confusion, and finally, a guarded wariness. "Mr. Alzara, what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize." The words hung between them, heavy with months of unspoken regret. Around them, the normal sounds of the store continued, the hum of refrigerators, the rustle of plastic bags, the quiet conversations of other customers. "Apologize for what?" Amara's voice was careful, neutral. "For firing you, for the way I handled the situation with Layla, for forgetting who I used to be." Amara was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting on the counter between them. "Layla asks about your books sometimes. She misses them." "Where is she now?" "At her new school. She got a scholarship to a place for gifted children, Riverside Academy." Rashid felt a complex mix of relief and something that might have been jealousy. Someone else had recognized Layla's potential, had stepped in to provide what he had denied her. "That's wonderful. She deserves that opportunity." "Yes, she does." Amara's voice carried a quiet strength that he remembered from their years of working together. "Mr. Alzara, why are you really here?" The question forced him to confront the truth he'd been avoiding for months. "Because I made a mistake. Because my pride cost a brilliant child access to resources that could have changed her life. Because I forgot that my success means nothing if I use it to diminish others instead of lifting them up." That afternoon, Rashid found himself at Riverside Academy, a converted brownstone on the Upper West Side that hummed with the energy of engaged learning. Through the windows, he could see children bent over microscopes, building robots, engaged in animated discussions about literature and science. Dr. Sarah Mitchell met him in her office, a space filled with children's artwork and academic journals in equal measure. "Mr. Alzara, I have to say I'm surprised to see you here. You know who I am. I know you're the man who fired Layla's mother for letting her daughter read. I also know you're the CEO of one of the most successful education technology companies in the world. The contradiction is interesting." Rashid felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'd like to make amends." "To whom?" "To Layla, to her mother, to your own conscience." The directness of the question caught him off guard. "All of the above, I suppose." Dr. Mitchell leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same intensity she probably brought to assessing her young students. "Layla is thriving here. She's making friends, challenging herself academically, discovering new passions every day. Her mother is working multiple jobs to make ends meet, but she's proud and determined to provide for her daughter without charity." "What if it wasn't charity?" "What do you mean?" Rashid had been thinking about this during the subway ride, an idea taking shape that felt both audacious and necessary. What if I offered Amara her job back, with a significant raise and benefits? What if I established a scholarship fund for children like Layla, kids whose potential is limited only by their circumstances? And what would you get out of it? The question hung in the air between them, demanding honesty. The chance to remember who I wanted to be when I started my company. The opportunity to align my actions with my stated values. Maybe some peace of mind. Doctor. Mitchell was quiet for a moment, then reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. These are some of Layla's recent work samples. Before you make any grand gestures, I think you should understand what you almost destroyed. The folder contained essays, drawings, and project reports that revealed a mind of startling sophistication and creativity. Layla had written a research paper on ocean acidification that would have been impressive for a high school student. Her drawings showed marine ecosystems with scientific accuracy and artistic beauty. Most moving was a short story about a little girl who discovered that books were portals to other worlds, written with the kind of emotional depth that spoke to real experience of finding escape and hope in learning. She wants to be a marine biologist, Dr. Mitchell said softly. She talks about protecting the oceans, about discovering new species, about teaching other children to love and understand the natural world. That dream started in your library, Mr. Al-Zahra. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? That evening, Rashid sat in his study, surrounded by the books that had once sparked a child's imagination. Layla's drawing of the octopus was now framed on his desk, a reminder of the potential he had almost squandered. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Amara, this is Rashid Al-Zahra. I was wondering if you and Layla might have time to talk. The meeting took place the following Saturday at a neutral location, the Central Park Zoo, where Layla could indulge her love of marine life while the adults navigated the complex terrain of apology and reconciliation. Rashid watched as the little girl pressed her face against the glass of the sea lion exhibit, her excitement infectious even in the awkward circumstances. She's grown, he observed to Amara as they stood a few feet away. Children do that, Amara replied, her tone carefully neutral. Amara, I want to offer you your job back, with a 40% raise, full health benefits, and a college fund for Layla. He saw her shoulders tense, her protective instincts engaging. Why? Because I was wrong. Because you're an excellent employee who deserved better treatment. Because Layla is a remarkable child who should have access to every opportunity to develop her gifts. And what would you want in return? The question revealed how deeply his actions had damaged her trust. Nothing beyond what you've always given. Honest work, dedication, care for my home, And maybe if Layla is interested, she could continue using the library. Layla chose that moment to run back to them, her face glowing with excitement. Mama, did you see the sea lions? They're so smart. The trainer said they can learn sign language and solve puzzles and... She stopped suddenly, noticing Rashid for the first time. Her expression grew uncertain, shy. Hello, Layla, Rashid said gently, crouching down to her level. I hear you're doing well at your new school. Yes, sir. We're studying marine ecosystems. Did you know that coral reefs are like underwater cities? They're home to 25% of all ocean species. Her enthusiasm was undimmed, her love of learning as bright as ever. Rashid felt a profound sense of shame that he had ever tried to extinguish this light. That's fascinating. You know, I have some new books about marine biology that just arrived. Books about coral reef conservation and deep-sea exploration. Would you like to see them sometime? Layla's eyes lit up, but she looked to her mother for permission. Amara was quiet for a long moment, studying Rashid's face as if trying to read his true intentions. We'll think about it, she said finally. 6 months later, the Al-Zahra Foundation for Educational Excellence held its inaugural gala at the Museum of Natural History, surrounded by the very marine life exhibits that had first captured Layla's imagination. The foundation, funded by Rashid's personal fortune, provided scholarships, mentoring, and educational resources to gifted children from underserved communities across New York City. Amara, elegant in a dress Rashid had insisted on providing, watched from the audience as her daughter took the stage to speak about the foundation's impact. At 9 years old, Layla had become something of a poster child for the program, but more importantly, she had become herself, confident, curious, unafraid to dream big. "A year ago," Layla said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong, "I thought books were just for other people, people who lived in big houses and went to fancy schools. But I learned that knowledge belongs to everyone, and dreams don't care where you come from." In the audience, Rashid felt tears sting his eyes. The foundation had already helped over 200 children, but it was this one child's journey that had taught him the most important lesson of his life. After the gala, as the guests mingled among the whale skeletons and dioramas, Dr. Mitchell approached Rashid with a knowing smile. Quite a transformation from the man who fired a housekeeper for letting her daughter read. "People can change," Rashid replied, watching as Layla excitedly explained marine biology concepts to a group of potential donors. "Sometimes it just takes the right teacher." "And sometimes," Dr. Mitchell observed, "the teacher is an 8-year-old girl with a crayon drawing of an octopus." 2 years after that first meeting at the zoo, Rashid stood in his study watching Layla work on her science fair project. Now 11, she was preparing a presentation on ocean acidification that would compete at the state level. Her research was meticulous, her passion undimmed, her dreams bigger than ever. "Mr. Alzara," she said, looking up from her laptop, "do you think I could really become a marine biologist? I mean, really, really?" "Layla," he said, settling into the chair beside her, "I think you can become anything you set your mind to. But more than that, I think the ocean needs someone like you, someone who understands that knowledge is meant to be shared, that discovery is meaningless unless it serves something greater than ourselves." She beamed at him, then returned to her work with the focused intensity that had first caught his attention years ago. Outside the windows of his penthouse, the city hummed with the dreams and struggles of millions of people, each carrying their own potential, their own hopes for their children's futures. Rashid's phone buzzed with a text from his mother in Dubai. "Saw the news story about Layla's science fair project. Your father would be proud. You remembered what he taught you about true wealth as he watched Layla work, surrounded by the books that had once seemed so precious to him. Rashid understood that his father had been right. True wealth wasn't what you accumulated, it was what you gave away that made others richer. And sometimes, the greatest gift you could give was simply the chance for someone else to discover their own potential." The Al-Zahra Foundation, now operated in 15 cities, had helped over 1,000 children and had become a model for how private philanthropy could create lasting change. But for Rashid, the real measure of success was much simpler. A brilliant child who had never stopped dreaming, a mother who had never stopped believing, and the knowledge that sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we least expect to teach us. If stories of second chances and the transformative power of education resonate with you, consider supporting literacy programs or mentorship opportunities in your own community. Sometimes the most profound changes begin when we recognize that every child's potential is worth nurturing, regardless of their circumstances. The next great discovery, the next breakthrough that changes the world, might come from a young mind that just needs someone to believe in their dreams and provide the resources to pursue them. As the evening light faded over Manhattan, Rashid reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had begun with pride and ended with humility, started with exclusion and grown into inclusion, transformed from a story about protecting what was his into a story about sharing what could be ours. And at the center of it all was a little girl who had taught him that the most valuable things in life, knowledge, wonder, hope, only grow when they're given away.